Hello, fellow aviators. Determining aircraft airworthiness is a legal requirement every PIC must accomplish before every flight. As such, pilots usually thumb through the maintenance records to try to find the required inspections. However, few pilots fully understand the variables necessary to properly fulfill this requirement. As a result, they frequently end up misunderstanding requirements or relying on the expertise of maintenance personnel while crossing their fingers and hoping that everything works out. Obviously, this is not the best strategy, so let's talk about the correct way to determine aircraft airworthiness. When it comes to determining aircraft airworthiness, there are two types of liability the pilot should be aware of: physical liability and legal liability. The pilot is always physically liable for all maintenance action because they are the ones in the aircraft and will have to deal with any safety concerns that arise. As such, it is always in the best interest of the pilot to be as informed as possible when it comes to the operational status of their aircraft. However, this is very time-consuming and not always practical, nor is it the intent of this presentation. Today we are discussing how to fulfill the pilot in command's legal liability requirements. The pilot is legally responsible to ensure that all of the requirements have been met and that the aircraft is in a physical and legally safe condition to operate. There are three areas that must be inspected to accomplish this task because operating an unairworthy aircraft may cause people to die. The first step in the process is to verify the presence of the required documents. These documents need to be in order, and, as is always the case with legal matters, the details matter. So, make sure these documents are as straight as an arrow. FAA Form 8100-2, better known as a Standard Airworthiness Certificate, is the first required document that must be verified. This document must be displayed in the aircraft, although exact locations vary between airframes. Once the pilot in command locates the document, there are four areas in particular that they should understand. Section 1 identifies the registration that the certificate is valid for. The pilot in command should verify that it matches the registration for the aircraft. Section 3 identifies the aircraft serial number that the certificate is valid for. This serial number must match the serial number found on the aircraft data tag and the pilot's operating handbook. Section 6 reminds the pilot that this certificate is only valid as long as the required maintenance is performed. This covers all of the required inspections as well as the appropriate handling of inoperative equipment as required by Part 91. This means that if any equipment is found to be inoperative, the airworthiness certificate is not valid until the pilot has reactivated it by following the tenets of 91-213. Lastly, this certificate is only valid if signed by an authorized FAA representative. Because this certificate must be displayed, it is often exposed to sunlight which can fade the signature over time. If the signature becomes unreadable, the certificate is no longer valid. To combat this problem, certificates issued after 2016 can use printed digital signatures that do not fade. The next required document is Form 8050-3, better known as the aircraft registration. Similar to the airworthiness certificate, this document must be displayed in the aircraft and has 5 areas the pilot should check. First, the pilot should ensure that the tail number matches their aircraft. Next, the aircraft serial number should match the aircraft data tag, pilot operating handbook, and airworthiness certificate. The next step is to verify that registration has been issued to the current owner. If ownership has changed since issuance, the registration is not valid and cannot be used. The expiration date is the next area the pilot needs to check. The current date should fall between the date of issue and the expiration date. However, due to the recent extension of the validity period, it is currently possible to have a valid aircraft registration that says it's expired. In these cases, the pilot should check the FAA registry by searching the tail number to find the actual expiration date. Lastly, the registration must be signed by an authorized FAA representative. Much like the airworthiness certificate, this signature can be a printed digital signature after 2016. The next step is only required for international flights. If required, a radio operator's permit can be obtained from the Federal Communications Commission after a registration fee is paid. The pilot's operating handbook is the next document that must be aboard the aircraft. There is only one POH per aircraft, but pilots can often get confused by the fact that many documents are mislabeled, and there is often poor training between the legal differences of these three categories of manuals. The first category is called an information manual. Despite often having the words POH or AFM on the cover, this document is not signed or assigned to an aircraft. As such, it does not fulfill the legal requirements and is only usable for a study aid. Because the information manual is not assigned to an aircraft, it will not contain weight and balance or specific equipment information. The second category is called a pilot's operating handbook. This document is signed and has been assigned to an aircraft, so the physical document meets the legal requirements. However, old POHs are non-standard and inconsistent with information given to the pilot. To fix this issue, regulations require all aircraft certified after 1979 to be issued an aircraft flight manual instead. The third category is called an aircraft flight manual. The AFM is approved and meets all legal requirements so long as it matches the aircraft. Additionally, the AFM standardizes information into sections. Section 1, General, Section 2, Limitations, Section 3, Emergency or Abnormal Procedures, Section 4, Normal Procedures, Section 5, Performance, Section 6, Weight and Balance, Section 7, Systems, Section 8, Servicing, and Section 9, Supplements. The weight and balance section can be found in Section 6 of the Aircraft Flight Manual. Pilots should verify that the numbers found in this section match the current configuration of the aircraft and that the correct numbers were used to calculate the loading of the aircraft. Company documents, flight apps, or personal records may be used for convenience. However, these calculations are not valid until checked against the information found in Section 6. These numbers are subject to change, so the pilot should verify that they use the correct empty weight before every flight. If the flight is conducted under instrument flight rules, there are a few more items that need to be documented. Having to do some extra work can stink a little, but it doesn't need to be as bad as a weak fart. The required weather briefing can be easily documented by receiving it from a recorded source. This is accomplished by receiving a briefing from 1-800-WX-BRIEF or through the briefing function on ForeFlight. A ForeFlight brief can be obtained by navigating to the Flight tab, then clicking on the briefing button. Known ATC delays will be included and recorded in a standard brief from either of the sources previously mentioned. Additional information can be obtained from the FAA website shown below. However, viewing this website is not recorded and thus is informational only. The next part of the acronym is the part that stinks. When you fart, you need to account for the fuel planning, alternate requirements, runway information, and takeoff and landing performance calculations. If you purchase a Performance Plus subscription from ForeFlight or use a similar program for your company, this information is recorded as part of the flight plan. Otherwise, a hard copy of this information should be kept to show compliance. The second step in the process is to verify the required inspections have been performed. Without these inspections, your legal airworthiness will get shot down by the anti-aircraft guns. The transponder must be inspected every 24 months. This inspection can be verified by the aircraft's airframe maintenance logbook. The 100-hour inspection must be performed every 100 hours if the aircraft is operated for hire. Some aircraft may allow a progressive inspection program to suffice this requirement. This inspection should be found in the aircraft's airframe maintenance logbook, as well as the engine and propeller logbooks if required. The emergency location transmitter must be inspected every 12 calendar months. In addition to the inspection, the battery must also be replaced at half of its life or after an hour of cumulative use. These requirements can be found in the aircraft's airframe maintenance logbook. Up until this point, identifying required inspections has been a fairly easy matter of identifying logbook entry dates. However, the last two inspections are a little more involved and require a more in-depth understanding. The annual inspection must be accomplished every 12 calendar months. This inspection must be recorded in all three aircraft logbooks. As part of this inspection, the mechanic is required to check that all applicable airworthiness directives have been complied with. As part of this check, many mechanics provide an airworthiness directive compliance sheet, which will be very helpful when moving on to the last inspection requirement. Airworthiness directives are issued by the FAA anytime a maintenance-related threat to safety of flight is identified. These threats can occur anytime and are primarily identified by two sources: the NTSB accident reports, and manufacturer service bulletins. After conducting an investigation, the National Transportation Safety Board makes recommendations if aircraft maintenance issues are found to be a factor. In these cases, the FAA will evaluate and issue airworthiness directives for the affected components if applicable. When maintenance issues are identified by mechanics, they work with the manufacturer to resolve the issue. Manufacturers keep track of these product issues, and if any trends are identified, they may consider issuing a service bulletin. There are several different levels of service bulletin depending on the severity of the problem. The highest level of service bulletin is called a mandatory bulletin. Despite the name, manufacturers cannot enact legally binding directives, so the operator can choose to comply or ignore with these service bulletins as they see fit. The FAA reviews service bulletins and issues airworthiness directives, which are legally binding, based on their content if safety concerns are identified. Now that we understand where ADs come from, the next step is to determine compliance requirements. The Code of Federal Regulations 91-403 requires the owner-operator to ensure that all airworthiness requirements are met before operating an aircraft. So, as the operator of an aircraft, how can the pilot in command know if these requirements have been met? AD compliance starts with the annual inspection. Note the date of the last annual, because all airworthiness directives prior to this date are no longer the legal responsibility of the pilot. Next, the pilot must research if there are any new ADs that have come due since the annual inspection. These new ADs fall into two categories: old new ADs and new ADs. ADs that have been previously complied with can require additional maintenance if they are a recurring AD. The AD compliance record, commonly created during the annual inspection, is the easiest place to find these old new ADs. Pilots should use these records to identify if recurring ADs apply and when they are due next. If an AD has come due since the last annual, the pilot must find a completion record in the appropriate maintenance logs. To find new ADs, or in other words, the ADs that did not exist at the time of the last annual inspection, the pilot must search the Dynamic Regulatory System. The DRS contains all regulations affecting aviation, including ADs. The DRS can be accessed at the following website. Pilots must check the DRS before every flight. So, to streamline the process, it is recommended that pilots create a DRS account. This will give the pilot the ability to save search criteria for easy reference in future inquiries. Saved filters can then be accessed in the Favorite Filters drop-down menu. To set up a filter, start by selecting the product type. From a maintenance records perspective, the aircraft is comprised of three main components: airframe, engine, and propeller. Appliances is a miscellaneous category that could apply to airframe or engine. If you only search for ADs on a Cessna 172, for example, you will only find airframe ADs. Select all four product types to avoid making this error. The next step is to set up the product subtype. In this drop-down menu, you can select the type of aircraft you are intending to operate. For example, today we will select a small airplane with a weight of less than 12,500 pounds. Selecting the specific aircraft information is the next step. You can select aircraft make and model in these sections. However, this will filter out the engine and propeller airworthiness directives, causing the pilot to miss critical information. This is why I recommend pilots leave these sections blank and add specific aircraft information to the keyword search instead. In this case, for a Cessna 172S with a Lycoming engine and Hartzell propeller. You can find your airframe, engine, and propeller information in the aircraft AFM or POH, or in your aircraft's type certificate datasheet at the following website. Once the filter has been appropriately set, click Apply and the results will appear below. Start by sorting the results by effective date, and then check what the effective dates are. If the most recent effective date occurs before the last annual inspection, then all ADs are in compliance. However, if any of the ADs have effective dates that are after the last annual inspection, further research is required. Next, compare the make and model information that the Airworthiness Directive applies to. Don't forget that you may have to click the expansion link if the applicable list is lengthy. If our engine is not on the list, then all ADs are in compliance. However, if our example aircraft is equipped with an IO360 C1 Echo 6, then we must look at Section C. Section C of the Airworthiness Directive outlines the applicable details. In this case, if our engine has connecting rods with these part numbers that were shipped within these date ranges, then the required action of Section G must be performed. Chances are high that you will not know what the part number and delivery date of your engine's connecting rods are. If this is the case, you will need to delay the flight until maintenance personnel can review the records and perform any inspections that are required for compliance. The maintenance record of these actions will then serve as legal proof of the AD compliance until the next annual inspection is performed. If the aircraft is being operated in instrument meteorological conditions, the flight must be important. So, in addition to not getting shot down, we must also prepare for a VIP. The VOR must be inspected every 30 days. This inspection can be performed by the pilot, so records can take many forms. However, every record must include the legal requirements of CFR 91-171 to be usable as a VOR check. This check must include the date, the location, the amount of error. Don't forget that if a dual receiver check is performed, the error of both receivers must be recorded, and then the pilot's signature. While not required, it is often good practice to include the type of check performed. The instrument cockpit check is not recorded, but must be performed during taxi for every IFR flight. This check can be accomplished with the memory aid, ready, set, go. Ready. During this step, ensure that the gyro and AHAR system is stabilized and indicating correctly, along with other non-pilot controlled systems. Set. During this step, the pilot should set and check all the adjustable instruments, including the altimeter, heading, and attitude systems as appropriate. Go. During this step, kinetic instruments should be checked during turns while taxiing, including the turn coordinator, skid, slip, or inclinometer. The last required inspection for instrument flight is the pitot-static system. This inspection must be performed every 24 calendar months and can be found in the airframe logbook. Lastly, the pilot in command must ensure that all the equipment on the aircraft is functional and safe. This is accomplished during the pre-flight inspection. If all systems are fully functional, you are good to go. However, if a system is found to be inoperative, the pilot in command must ask themselves if my flight can go. The minimum equipment list is the first place a pilot in command should look when they discover inoperative equipment. The process of obtaining an MEL begins with a master minimum equipment list. The MEL is produced by the FAA and is a generic form for a specific airframe. The operator then adjusts the MEL as desired and seeks approval from the FAA. Once the FAA approves an operator's MEL, they will sign it, and that MEL becomes a regulatory requirement for that operator. The minimum equipment list is broken up into sections based on the system it covers. Start by going to the section for the inoperative equipment that is in question, and then find the equipment that is inoperative. Next, look at sections 2 and 3 to find out how many you have and how many you need to be functional for flight. If the aircraft can be operated without the equipment in question, look at section 4 to find out what to do. M items must be performed by maintenance, and O items can be performed by the operator or flight crew. Lastly, look at section 1 to find out how long you have to fix the equipment. Category Alpha items have durations specified by the MEL. Category Bravo must be fixed within 3 days. Category Charlie must be fixed within 10 days. And Category Delta must be fixed within 120 days. If you do not have a minimum equipment list, then you must consult the next 3 areas, starting with 91-205 of the Federal Aviation Regulations. There is a long list of required equipment that can be remembered with the acronyms A-Tomato Flames and FLAPS. If the inoperative equipment is found on this list, the only option is to repair the component before flight. If the inoperative equipment is not in this section, then you need to consult the next step. The Kinds of Operation Equipment List, or KOEL, can be found in many aircraft flight manuals. Start by locating the equipment in question, then the type of operation you are planning to fly. If the section contains a 1, it is required and must be repaired before flight. If the section contains a 0, or your aircraft does not have a KOEL, then you must consult the next step. Gear stands for the aftermarket upgrades or modifications that may have been installed on your aircraft. These modifications require a Supplemental Type Certificate, or STC, to be issued. STCs are issued to companies that produce aftermarket parts for aircraft, and will be added to the aircraft's AFM in Section 9. If the equipment is required by the STC, it must be repaired before flight. However, if the equipment is not required by any of these documents, the aircraft is still not airworthy. The pilot must remember not to drop the ball by forgetting to reactivate the aircraft's airworthiness certificate using 91.213. The first step is to deactivate or remove the affected equipment. This may require the help of a mechanic depending on the details of the system. Next, a maintenance entry must be made in the appropriate aircraft logbook. This entry must detail the actions taken and be signed by the person performing the action. Next, the pilot in command must conduct an operational impact assessment of the effects the failed system may have on the safety of flight. If the pilot in command is not confident that the flight can be performed safely with the new operational limitations, the flight should be canceled. Lastly, a placard must be placed next to the system, or the switch for the system, that reminds the pilot and future pilots that the system is inoperative. So, to recap, don't die from flying an unairworthy aircraft. Instead, keep your VFR documents as straight as an arrow, and don't let a weak fart stink up flying IFR. Don't get shot down by the AA, and take care of your VIP for instrument flight. Lastly, if things break, remember to ask yourself if my flight can go, and if the answer is yes, don't drop the ball. Thanks for watching. I hope you found this presentation helpful, and if you did, please like and subscribe, and I'll see you on the next one.